bloopers. So we're
Okay.
good.
All right. Ready and you are.
I'm ready.
Um,
Hmm.
Welcome. My name's Jan Vanderhoop, and I'm really excited to welcome Coach D, Daryl
Good.
Andrews, to the call today. Um,
Yes.
Daryl and I met initially about a year and a half ago at a conference, and the relationship has just got deeper and richer over the course of the last year and a half, as we've all lived through a number of things together. Um,
Absolutely.
Coach D has done a lot of work over the course of his career in workforce
Mm-hmm.
development, but he's also done lots of programs,
Hmm.
training, reinvention programs with people who've been unemployed, who've been between things, who are struggling to find their way in life.
Yes.
And it
Mhm.
really is people from all walks of life, isn't it, Daryl, that you've worked with over the years?
Over the years, we've seen it from people who are impoverished to, executives of Fortune 500 companies that
Yeah.
have lost their jobs. So we work with, as you alluded to, Jan, we work with a lot of people, and we've helped a lot of people, which that's the exciting part about it, to see people land employment and get back on their feet. Yeah. Mhm.
So today we're going to be kicking off the first chapter of the first
Mhm.
title that we're
Yes.
creating together. So the
Yes.
the the theme for the next couple of conversations is going to be all about reinvention.
Yes. Yes.
And for today, what you said you really wanted to focus on, Daryl, and I think it makes complete sense, is mindset, because that's the
Yes.
foundation of everything. And
Yes.
so maybe start with a personal example if you can, because I know you're no stranger to having had to sort of rewrite your future, reinvent yourself, rebrand
Yes.
yourself over the course of your life.
Yeah.
I certainly had to do the same, but I
Yeah.
think it'd be helpful for people who are joining us today to get a sense of sort of what got you to where you are today.
Yeah, well, thank you for that, Jan. First of all, let me say it's a pleasure being, on this video with you, and I'm a big fan of the work that you're all doing there. The job optimize and the systems there are just phenomenal, and help people. You do what I do. I'm just helping people find employment, find meaningful employment, find good fits, reinvent things of that nature. So thank you for allowing me to be a part of this. Today we're going to talk about mindset, and we're going to really look at a few things. We're going to and this is going to help a lot of people. It's going to help people if they can just really listen and hear what we're saying as it relates to where they possibly are right now if they lost their jobs. If you're unemployed and you're trying to figure everything out, it doesn't look like it's going to go back to normal. Am I going to get my job back? It's all of these different fears.
It's a scary place to
It's
be.
a scary place to be, and we understand that deeply. And so we're going to talk about mindset from three specific areas. We're going to talk about trauma, reaction, and then we're going to also talk about expectations. But let me start with the trauma piece for me personally. I was born and raised in the city of Syracuse, New York. A single mom, public welfare system, and so you know, as a child, we experienced trauma in different ways. A lot of it was related to our experiences, things that were going on, and but something that shifted my life paradigm, and I think this is so appropriate for our conversation, was employment. There was an organization that worked with my mother who really had limited skills and limited education. They worked with her, helped her. And as a result of this help, she landed meaningful employment. She landed a job with a company by the name of US Air, which many people are familiar with, which became American Airlines, and which was recently, US Air was recently purchased by American Airlines. And that job, Jan, changed our lives forever and was really the foundational building block to the man I am today. Because seeing her work in that capacity, we had a chance as kids to travel all over the country because when your parent works for airlines, you travel for free.
Yeah.
So that was pretty neat. But we were able to go from the trauma of a challenged life to really the freedom and the beauty of what a good job can do for your life. So as a child, it was really employment that helped me to reshift my life's paradigm. Now, so
Can I
yeah.
pause you for just a second? Because there's
Sure.
something interesting in what you said that just occurred to me. I mean, when we think about work, we tend to think of it in the first person.
Mm-hmm.
I need to get a job. I need to provide. I
Yes.
need to whatever. I need to have stability and predictability in my life. But you're framing it through the eyes of a kid viewing it for their parent,
Beautiful.
which is
Yes.
very different. And
Yes.
we sometimes lose sight of the ripple effect that our own employment can have on others around us.
When I do training, Jan, and I do training and coaching, I always start with introspective type things. I want people to see the bigger picture, even if they're, let's say, at an older age, because you got some seniors that have lost their jobs, well, what about your grandchildren? If it's not your children indirectly, what about your grandchildren? And so, and sometimes it's when you can take your eyes off of yourself and see the bigger picture, that becomes motivational within itself. I'm doing this not just for me, I'm doing it for my children, my grandchildren, those I love. That's why my mother did it.
Role modeling.
She knew she had these two boys who were watching her. And she knew that the way that she went with this was going to be the way we would go. And so that motivated her to get up and go out and search every day when a lot of people in our community were not doing that. So yes, I agree with you. I didn't even think about it as I was saying it, but that is truly a different perspective when it's not just about me, but it's about the betterment of someone else's life as a result of my efforts.
Right.
Yeah.
Sorry, I sidetracked you. Go, but let's get back on track.
You didn't sidetrack me. I think that's a great topic. So, but I just want to share one other thing too, just to let our audience know. I know where you are. If you're hurting right now, if you're dealing with shock factor as a result of losing your job, I was just there. Now I'm self-employed, but there's still the employed part in self. I'm self-employed, which means I work like everybody else. And when this pandemic hit, I'm in the meetings business and I'm in the, people business and coaching and training. Well, back in February, late February, early March, I lost 90% of my business. Literally.
We lost 60% of ours overnight.
You know what I'm talking about. So we lost we lost our conferences, we lost our keynote speeches, we lost our training programs, some of the coaching programs, because people were pulling out because income was tight. So people pull out and say, I can't do this right now. And so I jokingly tell people I did the Netflix depression thing for about a week. Yeah, I got my popcorn and watched I did a few series. And then I said, well, wait a minute. I teach people how to reinvent themselves. Why don't I reinvent myself?
But that's interesting to hear, because we would tend to look at you and say, no, the guy's just resilient as hell. But the fact is, we all go through the same cycle, right? Yes. We all go through the shock, the anger, the resentment, the fear, the sleepless nights, the shame.
Yep, we do.
And it's so what you're, I think, probably leading up to is that's the range of human emotions when stuff happens that we're not expecting or we're not prepared for.
People think,
but it's more how you navigate your way through it.
That's the key. That's what I want to talk about, because people think that when you do stuff like we do, we're kind of like these sages on the stage and we have no problems. And one thing that I think that's always helped me to connect with people, I'm very real with them, and I share my challenges with them. And so that's why I'm sharing this challenge. But what I did after that first week was I said, well, let me take my own principles and apply them. And so I looked at my bigger picture as far as what I do. And I asked myself, how could I bring value to the marketplace in this current marketplace, in the current state? What do I have in my tool chest to be able to do that? And that's when we started shifting towards virtual programs and shifting towards virtual coaching, consulting. We created some free stuff where we're putting out, very similar like what we're doing now. Just put it out there and let folks have a chance to engage in some good free content, just to help. We were just trying to serve. Right. Just want to serve. And so as a result of making the shifts, position ourselves in the marketplace, within a 3-month period, we've gone from destitute to now I'm trying to figure out what my weeks, I got so much activity in my weeks look like, but that's because I reinvented. So what I want to share with the people today, Jan, I've lived through it recently. I'm not talking about years ago. We just recently lived through it. It was traumatic. I'm looking at my wife, my kids, my family. I got these, responsibility. So I feel when they said that whole saying, I feel your pain, I felt their pain because I was right there with them. Well,
and I think part of what got you to where you are now on the other side of that is the willingness to come from contribution. Yes. I think that's such a huge part, right? It's the willingness to give something of value with no conditions, no strings attached, in the hope that somebody else is going to benefit and appreciate it.
And you know what? One of my old mentors is Zig Ziglar. He said, his statement was simple. He would say, "You get everything in life you want when you help other people get what they want." And Zig said that over and over and over again. So there's definitely value in getting and contributing to society for the betterment of society, especially during tough times like this. But let me do a brief kind of go over briefly these three things
Yeah.
that happens when a person loses their jobs. I mean, the first thing, and keep in mind, we're talking about mindset. A good book I would suggest that people consider reading is a book by a lady by the name of Dr. Carol Dweck. The title of the book is Mindset, The New Psychology of Success, where she talks about growth mindset and fixed mindset. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it because I can do a whole course on this book, but I would suggest it because it would help with the growth mindset. Because what we're going to be talking about now is really, we're looking at the fears and realities of the times, and we know it is. We understand, and we have deep compassion for you. But the way you're going to make it out of this is the way you think through this process, and that's what we want to help with right now. So the first aspect here is trauma. And trauma, it really is what it is. When you hear the term, it really denotes what it says. It's trauma. It's traumatic, and trauma comes in many forms. If a person is in a car accident, they have the trauma of that accident,
Of course.
and it's pretty serious business. But trauma typically induces what we call the fight or flight syndrome. It's like something that's typically what comes out of trauma. We get the stress of it and we want to fight or flight. That's typically what we're looking to do. And so I want to give people a third option for trauma to think about this. And this is just what we're trying to accomplish here, Jan, with our work. That is to flee away. All right, flight, but flee away from the old mindset. All right, and fight for your future. That's
so
a different kind of a fight.
Different context. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Flee away from the old mindset and fight for your future. So in essence, you're doing fight or flight, but you're using it to your advantage. You're not just using it. It's just not consuming you and eating you inside like sometimes trauma can do. You're actually taking the angst of the moment and turn it into a plus. Well, I'm going to use this time to fight for my future.
So help me with that. Deconstruct the whole mindset thing for me. I mean, when you talk about, drop the old parts of the old mindset that aren't serving you any longer.
Right. Yeah.
That's not fine in theory, but let's put a little meat on that bone for us.
Yeah. So mindset is a byproduct of a bunch of things. We talked about trauma, but it could be childhood experiences. It could be, paradigms I've developed over a lifetime, all these different things. And so, and I think I may have mentioned to you, I don't want to go too deep, but there's another component of mindset, and it's called brain set. And, and the brain set is where you start to take ownership of paradigms, correct or incorrect. A lot of times they're incorrect paradigms. And once you take ownership of them, you defend them. So let's say if you're a person that's lost a job and you say, there's no more jobs out here. Well, your brain set is to wrap itself around, you think there's no more jobs. So you shut down and you never even pursue.
And you make it true.
You make it true, And so when you think about mindset, there's all these things that's trying to pour into your head, that's trying to just help you not help you, but to get you to think a certain way about something, be it positive or negative. Like with Dr. Dweck's book, fixed mindset people are people, when situations happen, they lock into the situation and they normalize it. And like you said, that's just the way it is. That's the way we do things. But the growth mindset people say, we're going to find a way around it.
Right.
We're going to not let this obstacle shut us down. So that
means I have to be listening to my own thinking and questioning it.
I have to question. This may sound weird because people always say something's wrong with you when you do this, but you got to talk to yourself. You got to have a conversation with yourself. And here's the big thing you got to ask yourself, Jan, when it comes to mindset, why am I thinking this way? Why am I thinking this way? Why am I thinking in absolutes when nothing is really in absolutes? People find jobs, people build businesses, even after traumatic situations. What is it about them? Are they different than me? Or, so you got to question yourself. But here's the second part. You got to challenge yourself. You got to challenge yourself. And you also have to, this is important. I don't want to go too far off because I want to stay in our lane, but you got to surround yourself with people that can help you challenge yourself. A mastermind group, an accountability partner. And these are individuals who, they're not there to placate you. They're not there. They are there to tell you, listen, we're going on a journey together. And I need for you to hear what I'm saying as far as these things that are blocking you, because there's barriers in your thinking that's going to limit your ability. And we're here to help each other with that. So, so that's just with mindset, it's not easy to drop things. You got to put systems in place to challenge your thinking. And that's when you start to get on this beautiful journey to a new you, because that old stuff is starting to slowly shed off because you're challenging it. Am I making sense? Does that make sense to you, what I'm talking about?
It's making sense, Daryl. And I'm wondering if we shouldn't think about ending here. I know we had more content that we wanted to cover in the first module, but we're coming up to about the 15-minute mark.
Yeah.
And part of it was context setting and the introductions and all that stuff. And I know that was an important part of this.
Yep.
But I think it would be so easy to sort of nod and step over what you just put in front of us. What I think what I'd really like is to create an opportunity for people to stop and reflect on it if they choose to. And so, I agree. In the materials that we're developing as a companion to these clips, we're going to be providing PDFs with sort of reflective questions that can get people thinking about their thinking.
Yep. And
I think this would be a great place to end off and allow people to really notice and stop and listen and notice the things that we're telling ourselves in our head.
Yes.
And asking, just ticking a column to say, is this serving me well or is this not serving me well? And if it's not serving me well, what should I do to reframe my thinking around that?
I'll say this as we wrap up this last session, this first session, which, first of all, thank you again for allowing me to do this. And this is a great place to end, you're right, because, and that's a great PDF, thinking about your thinking. That's really, because this applies to every aspect of life. Like, I'm a former athlete. And there was a times in my athletic career when I was a good athlete. And then there were times when I was a great athlete. I'll be honest with you. And that's not bragging about myself. It's just the reality of it.
Yeah.
The times when I was the great athlete, where I was breaking records in the newspaper in my hometown and doing things that were just kind of record setting and pace setting, it was all wrapped around the way that I was thinking, my mindset. When I started to get to the point where I saw myself as an athlete is the best athlete. You know what I mean? The best in my field that I was in. And I started to do everything, my training, my weight training, my studies, and all of that around that level I was in. So it shows you, again, in life in general, even though we're talking about work, in life in general, mindset plays a role in the way that, in the progressive thinking that your mind takes on because of who you now perceive yourself to be, in any particular given moment. So I agree with you. I think we need to stop here and just have pause and let folks think about that. But I just wanted to get that scenario. The way you think can determine the outcomes that you achieve.
Oh, the way you think always determines the outcomes you achieve. Yeah. And to your point, it's not passive thinking like, what am I going to have for lunch? It's the act of being deliberate in how you frame who you are, what's possible, what's going on around you, and what your intention is to create.
That's it. Absolutely. So
there's an awful lot there. I think let's give people some time to unpack it and reflect on their think about their thinking, and we'll come back again in a couple of days, and I'll look forward to the next conversation with you, Daryl. Thank you.
All right, then. Well, thank you. It's truly my pleasure.
Okay, so
yeah,
keep it running, and then go into the next.
Just go right into the next one.
Okay,
and so I think it would be just mindset part 2. Because we never even got to the reaction and the expectations. So
tell me there's lots there to talk about.
Oh yeah, well, yeah, we'll curtail it a little bit, but I just, this is a subject, man. This is deep stuff, and you can spend hours talking about it. And most don't. They just rush people into find a job. Like, I just had a bunch of people from Dallas the other day, about 40 of them, and they said my full-time job is to find somebody a job.
Right.
That's where they are. So anyway, well, I'm ready. We can jump right on into.
All right. So this is still about mindset, right? Mindset part 2.
Mindset part 2. Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
Welcome back. It's Jan Vanderhoop again with Coach D, picking up where we left off in our last session about the importance of mindset. And Daryl, you covered some really fundamental but critical ground last time about, just something as basic as stopping to think about your thinking. And notice the stuff that you're allowing to run through your head and being intentional or being at choice around what you're going to believe and what you're not going to believe about what you're telling yourself. And so
Mm.
hopefully everyone here has had a chance to reflect on that over the last few days, maybe work with the questions that we had available at the end of the last session.
Yeah.
Where to from here? Let's just assume that folks have had some insight into, you know, how they're labeling the situation they're in and what's possible for them. What's next?
Well, what's next is it goes again, and thank you. And I really thoroughly enjoyed that session, and I'm hoping that people will do the assignment, because realistically, you know, you progress in these things when you follow through with the various activities. So, you know, I like Dr. Benjamin Bloom's work, where he talks about the 6 levels of critical thinking, and he says knowledge is the lowest. He said because knowledge is not power, application of knowledge is power. So the highest level in his critical thinking spectrum is judgment and evaluation, how you apply what you've learned. And so what we're talking about, keep that Bloom taxonomy in mind, because application is the only way that this works. You know, the people we've coached over the years, the people we've trained, the success stories have always been people who've come back and said, we did what you said.
We thought about what you said.
I thought about what you said, actually did it. So let's again, trauma. We talked about that fight or flight. Remember we said, you know, in the first series, you know, we gave a third option, you know, that is fight for your future and flee from that old mindset. You know, so we just want to make sure that we just kind of recap that, because that's an interesting thing to think about. Most people just think fight and flight, but we gave it a new perspective. From that, we want to look at reaction. You know, how do I react to all of this? Like when things happen, because let's be real, Jan, this may not be the last time that we run into a traumatic situation. And, you know, and what I hope want people to understand is the successful people who achieve things in their careers and life are aware of the fact that this could happen. And their response to it determines what's next. What's going to be, what's in the horizon, you know, things like that. So let me share one real quick story. A book I read years ago was a book by a guy named Napoleon Hill. The title of the book was Think and Grow Rich. It was an interesting book because it wasn't necessarily about wealth per se.
Right.
But what he talked about in the book was what happened during the Great Depression. One of the stories. He said during the Great Depression in the United States, 2 things happened. You had a group of people who kept trying to forge ahead with the old way. Yeah. This is the way we're going to do things. This is the way we're going to accomplish things. Those people all faded away. They lost everything. Their businesses crumbled. Their lives crumbled. The second group were the people that said, we're going to reinvent ourselves. We're going to try some new pathways. We're going to rethink the way we do things. We're going to create synergy with people, and we're going to go down a new pathway. Almost 100% of them not only succeeded, but they thrived.
Well, they became the industrial giants of the next era. In many cases.
Sure did. They sure did. But that was because of how they reacted to it, Jan.
Right. Well, but there's a metaphor. There's a parallel in nature. I mean, you know, we tend to think that nature is stable, and we tend to want things to be the same, that are, you know, the way that was comfortable for us in the past. And the truth is, there's nothing in nature that is a constant. There, you know, stability is something that we've made up as something we strive for, but it doesn't exist anywhere in nature. And you know, over the eons, you know, people talk about Darwin and the survival of the fittest. It was never survival of the fittest. It was always survival of the most adaptable species. It's the species that evolve, that adapt, that take stock of what's happening in the environment around them and are able to take advantage of that and capitalize on it, are the ones that thrive. And it's the same today.
And it's going to be the same 50 years from now. It's just the reality of the matter is it's just what it is. And what we're trying to do through this, you know, this synergy and what we're doing with, you know, my company, Daryl Andrews Enterprises, yours, Fit First Technology, and Jobtimize, is get people to start seeing things a little differently, you know, to look at life from a different perspective. And it's almost like, to be honest with you, what we're trying to do is help folks become proactive, you know, proactive in taking ownership of their lives. You know, like that story, you know, hey, you had one group that kept pressing ahead, trying to do things, and they lost everything.
Yeah.
And that's happening right now with this crisis we're dealing with. Well, people still waiting and thinking that, you know, maybe that job that I had, it may not come back. What happens if it doesn't come back? So the reaction means a lot. And I want to talk about the reaction from a position of crisis. and talk about how people respond in crisis times of crisis. And it's important to understand. I'm just going to take it from a crisis from an Asian philosophy. My mentor taught me this many years ago, and where he talked about in Asia, the people there see crisis in particular. Matter of fact, I'll narrow it down even further to Japan. In Japan, people see crisis as one of two things: danger or opportunity. That's it. Danger or opportunity. And so the danger is real. Like I said, we talked about it. We don't want to discount anybody's fears because we know people, it happens. And we're very compassionate. I shared my story in the last segment about what I went through, But the reality of it is, when we talk about mindset, you have to be the one in charge of what this mindset goes through and the process and how you handle situations. And so for instance, using Japan as an example, when we dropped the bomb in Hiroshima, that could have devastated them forever.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they could have basically said, we're done. But out of the ashes of all of that, they said, no, we're going to be the number one technology nation in the world. We're going to be the number one tech nation in the world. We're going to be the number one steel manufacturer. So what was the difference between their scenario and many others? Their mindset. Mm-hmm. They took crisis and turned it opportunity. So what I'm trying to say with reaction from a mindset perspective is people have to be prepared that when times of crisis hit, how are you going to react to it?
Right.
And so to get your mindset to the point where you are, not to say that there won't be trauma and things won't be difficult, but your ability to rebound and reinvent and rebrand and do all these different things that cause people to continue to succeed is how you embrace it.
Okay.
And,
so make that practical for me. I'm here. I'm aware of my thinking. I know that, my circumstance doesn't have to be my future.
Mm-hmm.
What are the building blocks that'll get me thinking forward?
Right. Well, let's go to the third component. We talked about trauma. We talked about reaction. Now let's talk about expectation.
Okay.
All right. Because expectation is when it comes, or expectations of when it all comes alive.
Right.
Let's go back to that scenario during the Great Depression.
Mm-hmm.
The expectation of the group that continued to forge ahead, that, we're going to forge ahead, things will get better. And they didn't. So they were just trying to go back to the old.
Right.
The expectation of the other group was reinvent, rebrand, try some new things.
Things
Their
have
expectation,
changed.
things have changed.
It's time to move on.
It's time to move on. That is where we talk about building blocks. That is a foundational building block right there. It's what you expect. You know what I mean? If you're expecting things to remain the same and all of that, you're setting yourself up for trauma, re-traumatization. You're going to go back into trauma because what you expected is not going to happen. But if you say, man, and we'll be talking about this in a session going forward, I've developed these skill sets over the years that have value. You know what I mean? Yes, I was the vice president of human resources, but I learned how to train. I learned how to organizational design and theory. I learned how to manage and lead people. Jim Collins' book, was that book, From Good to Great. He always talks about how people can go from one company to the other and to make them succeed by the way that they think. And so the expectation is really the foundational build. I need to shift my expectations. What's the new on the horizon? What's the possibilities out there? What are the new opportunities that have emerged? There are right now so many virtual opportunities, virtual jobs, where people have just shifted gears, and some of these places can't even find enough people. They're looking and they're trying. But if I'm still thinking that I have to go back to the old, let me say that this way. One of my mentors, I have so many of them, but one of my mentors is a gentleman by the name of Dr. Miles Monroe. And he says this, and this is a powerful statement. He said, it's a tragedy to be preoccupied with the past at the expense of the future. That is a powerful statement within itself. So we need to start having these expectations. Let me add one more thing to it now. And then, and that is, don't try to go it alone. You need somebody to be accountable to.
Okay. So it's not about being able to pick their brain or somebody who knows more than you or anything like that. It's strictly somebody who's going to whoop your butt if you haven't done what you say you were going to do.
Why do you think? There it is.
Okay.
Listen. I mentioned athletics. What do coaches do to those athletes? They get up in there, they push them, they encourage them. Why? This is why. they see the potential in them.
Mm.
They're not doing it because they have nothing better to do.
Right.
They're
Right.
doing it because they see the potential. So somebody that's you're accountable to, they see the potential in you. And when they see you start to slide back into those old habits, they're gonna say, whoa, time out, time out. You're doing the same old things. Now listen, Jan, I'm talking to everyone giving advice. I've been through this process myself.
Sure.
I've had people in my life who've held me accountable, and I still do.
Yeah.
To the goals and dreams I have and the aspirations. Why? Because I'm human. I can get caught up. And sometimes it's not necessarily just my general mindset. Sometimes it's just activity. I'm doing 2,000 different things and I'm not focusing on what matters most.
Right.
And so my thing is with people who are unemployed, what matters most to you is either find the employment or maybe create something, consult, whatever it is you may want to do, but you shouldn't be stagnant or just sedentary. You need to be moving. That old thing, the body in motion tends to stay in motion.
So
Yeah.
let's make it real now for
Mhm.
many of the folks that are listening in, because
Mhm.
you the examples that you gave were sort of the HRVP and that sort of thing, and
Yep.
and it's easy to think, well, it's all well and good for them, but that ain't me. I'm not
Right.
that whatever.
Mhm.
Again, stuff we make up.
Yeah.
So let's talk for a second. I mean, I don't even know what the number is now. It's something north of 46 million people on the sidelines. We don't know how many of those jobs are ever going to come back, right? Certainly, big chunks of them, whether it's travel, tourism, hospitality, many others they may come back, but it's going to take 4 or 5 years. And so what you're saying is, if I'm going to stay on the sidelines and wait for my old job to come back or wait for my industry to come back, regardless what job and what industry it was, I'm in the danger zone. I'm at risk of being one of those industries that you described in Think and Grow Rich.
Yep.
And so this really is the time when I should be taking stock of all of my assets.
Yes.
And assets in the form of my experience,
yep,
my knowledge, my networks,
Mhm.
being clear about who in my network is good and positive and productive and going to move me forward, and relying on them to hold me accountable to do that, but also being clear on who in my network is a little more complacent, is gonna say it's okay, it's just relax, it's going to come back. More negative influences, people who are going to be more of a drag on my ability to move forward. And in some cases, I know I've had to, at different stages of my life, you have too. I've had to make choices about who I'm going to keep in my circle and who I'm not.
Yeah.
Right.
Yep.
That's all part of the taking stock of my assets.
Yes.
And maybe now being willing to take advantage of some of the opportunities that are presenting themselves to help me reinvent, because there's a lot of learning, training, resources, upskilling, upgrading. And I'm not even talking about college, university programs. I'm talking about community college. I'm talking about discrete pieces of information that could suddenly help me move forward. And what better time than the present to really give some thought, whether it's using Jobtimize or any of the other tools that are available, to get clear on what else is out there that I might be really well suited to and interested in.
Yep. Yeah.
And then starting to chart a path forward. Being in motion, even as volunteering, is being in motion.
Yeah. We're going to have a segment here where we're going to be talking about what's called transferable skill sets.
Okay.
And I don't want to go into that right now, but we're going to be talking about all the skill sets that people have developed over a lifetime that half the time they don't even know themselves. They don't realize that these skill sets are core competencies, and there's different names for them, how they can in essence possibly become future employment opportunities. Very similar obviously to what Jobtimize does, is from taking information and spitting out different job possibilities, but just on a personal level, for myself as an individual, just taking a self-assessment, really analyzing the multiple skill sets I may have developed. That's it. That takes time. I got to sit down. I got to have a pen and I got to have a pad, and thinking about it. So, but I want to save that for later, because you're right. It's if you're just thinking one lane and that lane closes, then you're in trouble.
Right.
But if you can start realize, hey, there may be several lanes here, several possibilities.
Or a whole constellation.
Yeah, that's exciting. That, to be honest with you, that gives you a little bit of hope and enthusiasm because now I'm not totally depending on one thing. I'm looking at another, and I'll say this as we get ready to wrap this segment up. That we understand that people some people have been on jobs for a long period of time, and what we're talking about with mindset is not going to be as quick for you to make this adjustment. I get it, because you've been on that job for 30 years. You don't even know what resumes look like anymore. You know what I mean? You haven't interviewed in 30 years.
More terrifying.
You're terrified, man. So I just want to keep revisiting the fact that we know that. And what we hope to do in this series is to help give you the confidence to, to be able to go out and just, redo life and redo your career, connect to some of these new sources. Like Jobtimize is a great tool to use, and start to not be so fearful of this world we're living in, because you really haven't been in it as far as job searching for years, but to take advantage of the resources, the vast resources that are out here, because there's many positive resources. So,
okay.
But yes.
So once again, Daryl, thank you for the conversation today. We're gonna have a set of resources and questions for people to reflect on between now and next time, and we'll pick it up again.
Can I just leave with one quote? I'm a big quote guy.
Please.
Yeah, it's my little quote. A quote by Henry Ford. And Henry Ford, years ago, people just couldn't believe the things that he accomplished, and he could, because I don't think he had much of an education. He's like 8th or 9th grade or something like that. And so he had a lot of people don't know he's really famous for the assembly line. He's known for the Model T, but the assembly line was one of his greatest inventions. He made quite a bit of money off of that. And so he was interviewed by this young man that asked him to share some insights and some wisdom with the world. And he kind of smiled, looked at the young man, and he said, "Young man, write this down." He said, "It's simple." He said, "If you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right." And he said, "My whole life has been, if you think you can, or if you think you can't, you're right." So we want people to realize, take a look at you can. Yeah. And I think that you'll get a better outcome.
Fabulous. Thanks.
Thank you.
All right. Cut.
Yes, cut. Yes. So we're at about 37. Do you want to try to squeeze one more in?
Yeah, I'm good if you are.
I'm good. Yeah. And then after that, I got to get ready to run, because this is like my desk right now. So take this stack down. I got all these trainings coming up, but I think we're good. We get 3 in.
Well, so let's wrap up this unit, because this is sort of the mindset chunk, isn't it?
Yeah. And I want to, did you want to go over to this because I laid the foundation for the transferable skill sets and all that. Do we want to go over there?
Sure. Okay. If you're ready.
Yeah, I'm ready. And there's only 2 things I want to talk about there are the transferable skill sets. And we'll give people, now that we've got the trauma, we did the reaction expectation, we're fighting for our future, we're fleeing away from the old mindset, and you're working on that. But now let's look at, what I mean? What do you own already? What do you possess? And let's see if we can help them to, make that connection.
Okay, good.
All right, I'm ready.
All right, welcome back. Here again with Coach D. This is the 3rd in our series of discussions, really conversations about reinvention. And the theme for this segment or the last couple of segments has been the whole thing of mindset and getting really clear on what we're thinking, what we're telling ourselves, and being ready to change our thinking so that we can create new possibilities in our lives. And then we left off in the last session talking a little bit about transferable assets.
Yes.
And Daryl, I'd love for you to, I know it wasn't necessarily going to be the next session, but because we foreshadowed it, let's pick up there and carry on that part of the conversation, because I think it's really important.
Yeah, thank you. Again, it's good to be back with you again, Jan. And one thing I just want to do before we kind of segue over here is just to remind people, the last 2 sessions, keep working on that. Mm-hmm. Keep working on that. That's not something that changes overnight. You know what I mean? And we, sometimes I tell people it's almost like we're always working on this, because life can throw us curveballs sometimes. So we don't want to ever drop the ball on mindset and the need, to position ourselves to minimize the trauma of situations that may happen in our future by being prepared. Right. I'll say this real quick, and I'll jump into these transferable assets and skill sets. I tell folks, and this is not for fear thing, but and I know in the United, the whole thing in the United States and globally they're looking at it, but they're talking about this revisit of COVID back in the fall. So what happens if that comes back and we're boom in the same situation? Do we, are we going to be re-traumatized? Are we going to go back into the same situation? I think preparation is going to be the key. And mindset is a big part of it. So please, I'm asking folks to make sure they continue to work on that. This is an
Yeah.
exciting, yeah.
So we're dealing with trauma now, but
Yes.
this won't be
Yes.
the last shock to the system.
No, it won't be the last shock to the system. It
Or
won't.
anything else.
Yeah, it won't.
It's a series of shocks and changes and traumas. That's just the way life is.
That is the way life is. And I think what happens is people get comfortable, and in their comfort, they're just comfortable. Things are good, money's good, life is good, taking vacations, and boom. Like, what is this disease from Wuhan, China? It's just shocking to our systems. But I think if we start to prepare ourselves and we look at this process of trauma, reaction, and expectations, things like that, then all of a sudden when things happen, and I think, to be honest with you, that was why I was able to make the shift after a week of Netflix, because I sort of programmed myself to not stay stuck in a mode. I'm just not, I've been that just too long. I gotta shift. And I've been exposed to too much information. I can't drop the information that I've learned. So I just want to make sure people embrace that. So we talked about those things, and now let's make the assumption there's some level of comfort right now as far as our thinking is concerned. We understand there's trauma. We're kind of moving through that. We kind of understand there's that reaction, crisis. We talked about crisis, danger, opportunity. Maybe there's some opportunity here. And then the expectations. What do I want in this new reinvented world that I want to live in? So we kind of got a feel for that. We've gone through some of these exercises. And so I want to talk about something I've been teaching on this for a long time, and I've always enjoyed teaching on it, is when you lose your job and you're thinking about possibilities for employment. We talked about this once before. Most people want to go back to what they've always done, and that's not always the case.
Right.
What we want to look at is what are the multitude of skill sets that we've developed over a lifetime based upon certain aspects of how we've lived our lives. And what I mean by that, through our job, through volunteerism, or just life. There's so many skills that we pick up.
Yeah.
Through our job.
And we tend not to think of all of those, right?
There you go. Mm-hmm. We tend not to think of all of those. We tend to think employment from one dimension, what we've always done. But what we don't realize is it doesn't, and this is not high level stuff. This can be, you can be, like a vice president of US sales. You could be in any position and learn certain skill sets. You could be in customer service where you've learned sales techniques, working with people.
Or you've learned to engage in a conversation with someone.
Yes, absolutely. Which is valuable.
As basic as that sounds,
yes,
the ability to engage with someone in a conversation is a skill that's in high demand in so many places.
High demand, especially in this virtual universe that we're dealing with. There's a lot of communications going on. And so you have that gift that maybe, and I don't want to go too far into all of this, but I like Dr. Howard Gardner's theory of multiple intelligences, how we're born with these different intelligences and all. But these transferable skill sets are skill sets that, again, through employment, through volunteerism, or just through life. My neighbor, I mentioned him multiple times. He had a job doing something, and he kept getting laid off from that particular line of work. But you would always see him out there fixing cars. He loved his cars. He was always working on cars. He actually built one. He built his own car. And so I guess I never really asked him, but I guess he got to the point where he probably said enough of this. And he started his own auto mechanic place that's thriving. But that was a hobby to him. He wasn't, that wasn't his career. And now I bet you he's probably doing better with that career, his current career, than he was the previous. And so what I'm saying is that's a life experience. That wasn't even volunteerism. That wasn't work. That's something he was good at doing.
It was a hobby.
It was a hobby.
Yeah.
That he's turned into a career. Some people volunteer. They volunteer for organizations, and they sometimes lead in the volunteer capacity where they're delegating responsibilities and they're getting people to do this and do that. So, yeah.
And so, it's funny, Daryl, if I can just piggyback on that for a second, because, over the last 3 years, I've had the immense privilege to work with a couple of foundations that work with veterans who've come back from service and are really having a tough time reintegrating into civilian life. and a big part of that struggle comes from the fact that often, they get stuck trying to figure out how to convert the skills, if you like, that they had in the military into something that a civilian recruiter would understand.
Mm.
And when we're talking to them, it's often they've been out for a while, they've struggled to find work, sometimes for several years, just never really gotten the traction that they were looking for, and they're a little beat up and they're a little bit hopeless.
Mm-hmm.
And so our very much aligned with your message about, you can only spend so much time binging on Netflix before you got to get back into gear again. It's with them, it's been absolutely the same message. It's been, it doesn't matter whether you're working or whether you're volunteering or whether you're giving away your time at a nursing home and looking after, just brightening somebody's day by doing nothing but sitting down in front of them, asking a question and listening to their answer. It doesn't, being in motion is what sets in motion a whole other set of collisions.
Mm-hmm.
Right? There's no collisions possible in your living room watching Netflix.
None.
But to your point, it's in the act of being out there that you're going to run into other people. Absolutely. And engage in conversations, and even in the act of volunteering, if you're in a soup kitchen, you're demonstrating the ability to follow orders, you're demonstrating the ability to be punctual, you're demonstrating the ability to engage with the public, so those are all micro skills that we wouldn't think to talk about ourselves as having, because when we think skills, we tend to think more lofty things. But if I've demonstrated the ability to do this, and that, even in the course of my volunteer activity, guess what? Those are completely transferable, to your point.
It's the most amazing phenomenon that most people don't know about. It did it because, again, it's not taught that much, and we're teaching it right now. And so why am I going to analyze something when I'm never even taught this stuff? And so the people I've had a chance to work with over the years who've embraced this, man, it's really been phenomenal for them. I remember I did this training down in Texas. They had we do this thing called rapid response, and rapid response basically means a company lays off pretty much everyone, but they offer someone to come in and train people on job search techniques and things like that. So I remember there's this company in Texas. I can't remember the name of it, but they're a big book chain, owned a bookstore. And they closed down, and in one location in Amarillo, they laid off like 500 people. And so I went down there and spent about 3 or 4 days training them on what we're talking about right now, transferable skill sets. But we also looked at various technologies that they can pursue. And I wish I would have known about Jobtimize back then, but I didn't.
It didn't exist then.
Yeah, that's true. That's a few years ago. Yeah, I wish it did. and so, but anyway, I remember going through that training. We talked about transferable skills, and by the end of the week, I got a call from 3 people, and they told me I found a new job in the new category that you talked about during that training. Just that fast.
Amazing.
Because you know why? They applied the information. So it works. It definitely works. And I think people now have greater resources out there, like a Jobtimize, to help. But there's the thing we're trying to communicate with this, because we're talking to people who have lost their jobs, is this is another feather in your cap, another thing in your tool chest. It's just it's these are skills. And let me add one more to this too. And then there's this thing called core competencies. And I think that's important to think about too. And I always tell people on a resume, start with your core competencies, not your experiences. And your core competencies are things like teamwork, team player, get along with people, things like that. Because in your resume, people typically start at the top and they look down. And so if they just see your employment, they're going to measure everything there. But if they see you have these core competencies, they're like,
Yeah. And if somebody's done Jobtimize, all they have to do is look at their defining traits as a starting point to be able to say, all right, these are the things that most define me. Yeah. How have I put these to use in the past? Yep. And that's a beautiful addition to your point, a beautiful addition to the resume, to the cover letter, but it's also a great cluster of information that I can go into the interview with.
Isn't that beautiful?
Because I can now demonstrate to the interviewer, whether it's the hiring manager or whether it's a recruiter, who I am as an individual and how that translates into success on the job.
And that's what people are looking for now.
Yeah, it is.
Really, in this day and age, people are looking. I know because you talk to a lot of employers, like as I do, I'm sure, and they'll tell you, they're looking for soft skills. They want people to come in with good work ethic, good attitude, team player. I mean, all
Yeah.
those type of things are almost equally as important as the expertise.
Yeah, that's all the stuff that can't be taught.
It can be taught.
It's who I am as a person. You can't teach that.
There was some research that was done by Harvard University some years ago where they interviewed 300 of the Fortune 500 CEOs, and they asked a simple question. They said, "What's more important, hard skills?" And we're going to talk about this in another segment, but want to lay a foundation: hard skills or soft skills. Listen to this number. They out of the 300 CEOs, 85% came back and said soft skills.
I believe
it. And they said because we can teach the other stuff. But that one, we need people to come in ready to do these things. So that's not, that's a nice addition to our conversation, because when we're doing our job search, we need to be able to communicate that we possess these skills. We need to be able to communicate that I have a good work ethic. We need to be able to communicate I'm a team player. What does that do? That sets you above the pack.
So back to transferable assets. I mean, if we were to leave this session with a set of steps that somebody could take in order to start to take stock of their transferable assets, Daryl, how would they go about that?
I would just do a simple self-analysis. Just a simple self-analysis, and we can put up a sheet to help them with this. You know what I mean? Just to do that for this segment. But I would write down transferable assets or, transferable skill sets at the top. I will put down work, I will put down volunteerism, and I would put down just life. And I would maybe come up with 4 or 5 things that have skill sets that have emerged from the 3. I mean, it's amazing. I don't want to minimize things, but people might think that I love cleaning, and that's a limited, possibility. Well, I know a lady that moved here from Mexico, and that's all she did was clean. Now she has 20 people working for her, and they're cleaning all over the place, and she's not cleaning as much anymore. She's just managing the money, and and so little skills that seem so trivial could realistically turn into something that could produce revenue. There's companies that hire people to do this kind of stuff. And so don't make it doesn't be big or little. What are the skill sets? What are the things I learned? I learned how to train. I learned how to communicate. I learned how to analyze situations. I learned all these different things, and then say, man, how could they be positioned for maybe possible employment, in a specific arena, And so it's doing an analysis of some of the skill sets first that I've learned through volunteerism, through life, and through my employment, and then looking at those. And obviously, if there's 15 or so of them, maybe not looking at all of them, but maybe picking a few and saying, okay, how can I connect these to real world job possibilities, and start seeing what are some of the employment requirements for certain jobs that fit these skill set categories. So that's a basic place to start. We can talk more about it in another segment, because I don't want to rush through this. But doing a self-analysis is important. Well,
I'd just like to point out that we've now taken 3 sessions to cover the ground we thought we were going to do in 1. So Daryl, I really want to thank you for digging deep and sharing this treasure of experience that you're bringing to the table. And I look forward to starting our second segment next time.
Thank you. And I'll tell you something. These can be 3 individual segments. So even though so these are like for the next 3 weeks to do this, and next segment will, which I think we kind of rolled into the segment 1, which is that transferable skill sets. So it's kind of over into another category. But this is enough for people to kind of chew on for a while.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's all right. Thank you, Juan. Thank you, Jan. Yep.
Thanks, Daryl. So there we go. I think that's a wrap. You've got other stuff to move on to.
Yeah, I do. Yep. And so what I'm going to do is let me end the broadcast right now, and this is going to go over into